Good day, and welcome to Soft Skills, Strong Results, Practical Strategies to Master Interpersonal Communication. I'm your host, Charlie Krebs. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of soft skills in marketing. Marketing isn't exactly somewhere where you'd think of using soft skills, but we've got a special guest here today. His name is Pat Schober. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you for having me, Charlie.
Pat is the founder and CEO of Poetica Marketing. Do you want to give us a little bit of an idea what Poetica Marketing is?
Absolutely. Poetica Marketing is a marketing and events company based out of Pittsburgh, and we help companies stand out online and in person.
Well, I know you've helped me out a lot. I'm one of your clients, and I've learned so much from working with you. I mean, I thought I was just hiring somebody to do a service for me, but you've actually been teaching me a lot. And so that's why I asked you here today, because I think we have a really good connection. And I think we can have this conversation, even talk about some of the soft skills that we've used in our relationship. So thank you for being here. You've been in business, what, 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years since 2018.
Great. Well, before we get started, can you just give me an idea of how do you define soft skills?
Absolutely. I think soft skills are everything that we bring to the table in communication that isn't the written or spoken word. So it is the strategies that we use to communicate. It is the ability to use and read body language. We often simplify communication into the messaging that we give, but soft skills are often how we deliver those messages.
So how do soft skills impact the message?
Well, in a few different ways. So when we're communicating to somebody face to face, or we're communicating with somebody over Zoom where there's a visual component, we often want to be able to read somebody's body language. Are they defensive? Are they upset? Are they angry for any sort of reason? And if so, the way we might approach our messaging might change a little bit. Soft skills get really interesting in marketing copy and marketing collateral because we are communicating for an audience that we often can't see, and often for an audience somewhere in the future, whether that be 5 minutes from now, or 5 days from now, or 5 months from now. We are preparing content that we won't be able to give context for. We can't hand it over and say, hey, look at this marketing copy. Here's some of the context behind it. So soft skills in that case often require us to understand what makes a person tick, what's valuable to them, what are their wants, needs, and desires in any given moment. And understanding that helps us become better communicators.
So how do you think their desires in any given moment impacts the way that they deliver that message and the way that people perceive that message?
Yeah, so our understanding of somebody's wants, needs, and desires helps influence us in the way we sort of structure our communication and our language. During one of our recent sessions, we talked about word economy and that E.V. White and William Strunk rule of omit needless words, right? And how do we arrive at a message that's punchy, that's captivating, that really has impact? And so that's really what we're looking at, is how do we identify what somebody needs in the moment, and how do we deliver that in our language and in our soft skills as well.
So, for example, when we were having our meetings, I mean, today's the first time we've actually only met in person.
Yeah, right.
But when we've had our meetings on Zoom, did you notice any soft skills that I was using that sort of informed you about how to work with me?
Yeah. So you are a wonderful communicator, and you have a great voice. One of the things that I recognized early on is you're very thoughtful, and you also just don't have the same tech level or the same tech advancement that I do, right? And so sometimes I see you very thoughtful when we're talking about the way to use technology in our marketing efforts. And so when I notice that, sometimes I slow down a little bit, and we'll explain the reason for using a certain technology and the advantages it has. And then we talk about how to actually implement it. And I think that if somebody has a better understanding of why they're doing something, they're more receptive to the step-by-step process of using it.
Well, and one of the things I've noticed, and I've even mentioned this in emails, is clearly I didn't grow up with technology the same way that you did, but you don't treat me like I'm an idiot. As somebody that's almost 70 years old, people sometimes look at me and go, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And while I may not, I think it sends a clear message when you let me know that my level of expertise doesn't impact what my value is or something like that. Where did you learn to do that?
What's interesting is, as I was kind of preparing for this conversation, I was really thinking about, what do I value in communication, and what do I think makes effective communication on all levels of communication, as a leader in the workplace, as a manager, as a partner, as a friend. And I think that really good communication boils down to empathy and respect. And empathy to me is understanding the person, and respect is understanding the professional. So on the empathy side, I'm constantly seeing, what drives an individual, and what do they care about, and literally how is their day going? And on the respect side, everyone brings something unique to the table. You might not understand all of the technology that we use for marketing efforts right out of the gate, but I know that as a professor, as a student, as a lifelong learner, you have the capacity to learn those. And I also know that the things that you do for your job, you're very good at. You're an excellent communicator. You're an excellent presenter. And so, so this is just a small part of your job, and I've been hired to help consult you on them. But that doesn't mean that you can't accomplish them, right? And the other thing I was thinking about with empathy and respect, I think that effective leadership is an investment. I think that empathy and respect take time. It is, from a leadership perspective, if you're managing a team, it's very easy to say, hey, go do these things. Don't bother me until they're accomplished. But it's a much different time investment to say, hey, these are the things that we're going to try to accomplish together. What are the resources that you need to accomplish them? And what else can I provide you to make you successful? And that upfront investment is different, but I think it has greater long-term gains, because the individual feels respected, they feel heard, and you know that you're investing in them long-term so that they can deliver greater value in the long run.
So if a client feels respected, how does that help them be more successful? I mean, if you help me feel respected, how do you think, what's your goal in making me feel that way?
I think it's a symbiotic relationship, right? If I can help you grow, and I help you grow in your business and the activities that you're pursuing, that helps me, because then you can invest again in our relationship, and vice versa. So we end up pouring into each other. And at the same time, I'm helping you have a greater impact with the people that you work with, and also helping you open up new opportunities to work with new people.
Well, and I remember a conversation that we had one time where you talked about how empathy encourages trust. How does it do that?
Well, on the empathy side, I think that's interesting because, like I said before, although we have professional goals together, we need to connect first as people. Because if I understand some of your background and you understand some of my background, and I understand what makes you tick and you understand what I'm passionate about, that helps us connect as individuals. And if we're connecting as individuals, we can have a more prosperous professional relationship as well. And I think a lot of that stems from trust. So when, for example, you talked about you didn't necessarily grow up with the technology that I did and then I use on a regular basis, I might suggest doing something on LinkedIn or on Eventbrite or using another tool, and you might have never used them before, or at least in those ways. And so you are taking a leap of faith in what I recommend in your marketing strategy. And that leap of faith becomes a lot easier if you trust me and you understand that I have your best interests at heart.
So how do you get me to trust you? I mean, I do trust you, and I never thought about what you might have done to get me to that position, but what do you do to help? What kind of soft skills do you use to help someone trust you?
In the client relationship or in general?
Start with the client relationship.
Yeah, I think a lot of that starts in the sales process. So I look at sales as a service role, and we are selling solutions of some kind, right? We have a product or we have a service, and ultimately it is selling some sort of solution to a problem. And when I approach sales, again, I try to do it from a perspective of empathy and respect. So when I meet somebody for the first time, I want to understand what are the problems that they're currently facing and what's at stake for them. So what's at stake for them varies depending on their place in the company. So if they're the owner, everything is at stake for them. If they are a marketing manager, they are responsible for growing the business and also making their boss happy, right? And so I need to understand what are their goals And also, what have they tried in the past? Have they been burned by other agencies? So a lot of it is questions, and it's really digging down to understand what are they passionate about? What are their goals? What sort of fears do they bring to the table? And then as I develop strategy or kind of review some of our case studies together, we're really building a relationship where they understand whether or not I am the right fit for them. I don't try to be too pushy. I try to say, these are your options. This is what we've done in the past, and let them come to a conclusion where either I'm a great fit or I'm not a great fit. And part of my job as a salesperson, I believe, is with that empathy. If I don't think I'm the right fit for them, I have to be able to say that. And that's great for me too, because that frees up my time to go pursue other things that are better fits as well. So trust really starts in those initial conversations. And then when we do have a working relationship together, I think it really helps to have some early wins. So right out of the gate, what are some things that we can accomplish early on that set us up for success and also help establish that trust? So if we set up a timeline at the very beginning, hey, we need to get this set up, and we need to accomplish X, Y, Z. Well, I need to hit those deadlines early on. And if I can hit those deadlines early on, or even exceed those deadlines or expectations, then I've achieved what I set out to, or what I promised to achieve. And there's already some trust being formed there. And then after that, the relationship becomes a lot easier because they feel more comfortable with me, generally, is what I've seen.
Well, speaking of deadlines, I remember when we started working, you said, well, let's get together and let's meet once every couple of weeks. And so at some of our earlier meetings, we talked about things, and you said, well, let's get to that in a couple of weeks and everything. And so I think what you were doing, and I didn't realize it at that time until you just explained it right now, is that you were setting it up so that I could trust you. You were putting me in a comfortable position where I knew that every 2 weeks, I'd be able to bring questions to you. So
yeah, and that's definitely part of it. Also, it's seeing the overall marketing strategy and understanding that there are certain priorities in place. And sometimes we have to do some grunt work before we get to the interesting stuff. And so sometimes we have to delay some of the more interesting opportunities, like this podcast, for example. This probably wouldn't have been a great opportunity for you in those first few weeks that we were talking, because we were still establishing some of your branding and really what you wanted to pursue. But now that you have a better understanding of what you're after and what you're shooting for, I think this is a wonderful platform for you.
Well, one of the soft skills that I've worked with a lot has to do with, say, tone of voice. And something about tone of voice is subtext. What are you saying underneath it? So when you have a client, you talked about working with a client that might be a little nervous or whatever. What is your subtext, and what can our listeners learn about subtext that they could use with their clients?
I think that people tend to match energy in a lot of ways. And if somebody's nervous, approaching that with humor or a sense of calm can be very advantageous, because then they can be soothed into a certain level. Or if we can use humor, we can kind of break the tension. In my own case, sometimes people tell me I have a good podcast voice. I try to speak softly when necessary and clearly. And for some people, that's very soothing. And that's not necessarily something I do intentionally. I'm just very fortunate to have that naturally. And maybe I've developed it a little bit. But I think you're right. Working on your tone and focusing on your tone can make you more accessible to people.
Well, if we were to think of tone of voice as sort of the captioning that we see at the bottom of movies or TV shows or podcasts or things like that, if that's the subtext, what do you hope people hear in your subtext?
I do hope they hear that level of empathy and respect, but I also hope they hear value. And I want them to know that I have their interests in their best interests in mind, and also that they can kind of hear the value in the strategies that I'm outlining and proposing, and also that they feel a certain sense of excitement from all of that as well.
Now, at one point, you talked about working with your wife.
Yeah.
Now, I would certainly imagine working with your wife is different than working with a client. So how do soft skills play into the relationship that you have with your wife, who also works with you?
Yeah. So I will say I am very fortunate to have a lot of models of success in working with a spouse. So my parents were business partners. My brother and his wife are business partners. My other brother and his wife also work together in a few different capacities. So this wasn't, fortunately, completely foreign for us. This wasn't a total leap of faith at the beginning. I will say that there are challenges to working with your spouse. It's very easy when you're working together throughout the day, and you both have skin in the game. You both think about client projects and opportunities all day long. And sometimes the other person just doesn't have the bandwidth to think about it anymore. And so we both understand that, it might be 7 o'clock at night and we might say, hey, you know what we should do for this one client? And the other person has full freedom to say, hey, I can't talk about this right now. I'm really excited about it, but I'm completely whooped. And let's just table that for later. And so there's mutual respect there and understanding what the other person can accomplish. And a lot of our balance that we strike comes from really clear communication and expectations. So we have a meeting every Monday morning, and we sort of outline what the rest of the week looks like, what our goals are for the week, and what we're doing from a sales perspective, what sort of events we have planned, what sort of marketing campaigns we're running. And the other thing that we always have going on in the background too is childcare, because we have a 16-month-old. We do have a nanny throughout the day, but she's only there for 6 hours. And so we really have to balance, if it's after 3 or it's before 9, who's taking care of Zayden, and who's he with, and how do we kind of swap those responsibilities as needed. So there's a lot of communication that goes into making sure that we have a very smooth relationship.
Well, now we've talked about communicating with other people. Let me just ask you a question about your child. What kind of soft skills can parents use?
I had not prepared for that question at all. And I am a very new dad, but I think that patience goes a really, really long way. And I think the ability to be present, and present being physically, mentally, and emotionally there. So your phone's away, the TV's off. And sometimes that just means like sitting in the grass with him and plucking at leaves and bugs and just taking a look at things. I think that has been one of the most challenging things to achieve, but also the most rewarding thing as a father is just being there for those little dumb moments of exploration.
When you talk about presence, I think a lot of times when we interact with people, we get the sense that they're someplace far away, whether they're on their phone or whether they're looking someplace else, or where they've got a million different things on your mind. How important is presence when you're communicating with another person?
I think it's everything. We all want to feel heard and understood. And the more that we can communicate that we are present, the better we achieve that. So it's small things, right? It's keeping our phones away. If we have them out, keeping them turned over. It's making eye contact. It's physical positioning of bodies to make sure that we're communicating effectively. So I think presence is another form of respect, and everybody wants to be respected.
Why is it a form of respect? I agree, but why do you think so?
It goes back to everybody wants to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be understood. And so if I'm more present, I am helping you achieve all of those things.
Great. Let's talk about leadership. What do you think are some soft skills that are important for good leadership?
Yeah, I touched on some of these earlier. Again, I think it goes back to empathy and respect, but it also goes back to things like strategy and a vision for the future, really a lot of long-term planning. So again, to kind of recap, I think empathy, respect, having a vision, communicating that vision is all very important.
Great. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to learn soft skills, but we never really learned communication. We sort of learned communication by accident, if you will. And some people are better at it than others. So if someone wants to improve their soft skills or their use of soft skills, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think having a mentor can be advantageous. So, and that doesn't always mean like we have to go looking for a speech coach, although that may be the exact thing they need to do. But recognizing those individuals in your life who do a great job of communication and people that you look up to, or even the people that you feel really comfortable around that aren't necessarily your friends, but people you interact with on a professional level, and being able to say, what is it about that individual that makes them so compelling or makes me so comfortable around them? And then either interviewing them to kind of figure out how they approach communication or even establishing a mentor relationship. Another great thing is continuing education. So podcasts, reading, you can always pick up like a Dale Carnegie book and kind of figure out, what are some tricks I can use in communication. But another thing is I like to do is listening to a lot of podcasts. Right now, I'm really into Make It Happen Monday, not sponsored by them, but that's a really great sales podcast. And kind of talk about different strategies for communicating with people and understanding the sales cycle and just really improving your opportunities on that end. And it might be, you might read an entire Dale Carnegie book, or you might listen to an hour-long podcast. You might only get one actionable tidbit from that entire exercise, but that's one extra tidbit than you had before. Mm-hmm. And that might be the difference in establishing great relationships and having great sales and just having better communication overall.
Well, I know when I was growing up, hard selling was very prevalent. People would try to force people into it. And now it seems like we've swung the pendulum the other way. Why has that happened?
Again, I don't identify as a sales expert, but I have been working in sales for the last 6 years. And I think there has never been more information that's readily available out there. I think we have consumers on both the corporate level and the regular level that are better informed than ever before. The information we need is a Google search or a ChatGPT search away. And so people generally, I think, have an idea of the opportunities that are out there, the solutions that are out there. And they already can come into a relationship with a pretty good idea of what they need and what the options are in the market. And now they're just trying to find the right fit for them and the personalities in their companies. So they're just better informed. And it's not just so much of like, I'm not walking around anymore trying to sell aluminum siding, right? It's really like, is aluminum siding the best option for you? And if not, let's kind of talk about what other alternatives might be out there.
Well, you had mentioned Google and ChatGPT. How do you think our relationship with virtual world, if you will, social media, has changed people's use of and reliance on soft skills?
Really great question. And I think, well, a couple things. There's a really, really interesting story about this project called the Alexa project. Alexa was one of the very first pseudo chatbots ever developed. This was like in the 60s, years ago. And it was just a language program that was designed to ask questions based off of inputs. So you might say something like, I'm having a great day. And Eliza would say, why are you having a great day? I'm having a great day because it's my birthday. Oh, happy birthday. What are you doing today? So it's just asking these questions to continue a conversation. But there's a great story about the assistant to like the lead programmer on this project. She was alone in the office one day talking to Eliza, and she was having like a very vulnerable conversation with this computer. And the programmer came in and she kicked him out because she was having such an intimate moment with this machine that was completely unreal, but it felt real to her, right? And so this is a very private moment, and she kicked him out of the room. And we're starting to see some of that today. If you look at some of the research, younger children or younger kids today, they don't have the social maturity that is often to be expected in 16, 18-year-old going out for their first job. We've been so locked behind screens, and you think about like kids who were growing up during COVID and missed out on a lot of significant social interaction in a lot of different ways. You have hiring managers complaining about kids who can't make eye contact, or just have trouble showing up on time, and all of these little things that we sort of take for granted because they've always been expected, they're missing out on because they have grown up in a digital space. And some of that's anecdotal, some of that actually is in research, that there are issues there. But I do think that ChatGPT and AI and all of these new digital tools have changed the way we think about communication and soft skills, both for the better and for the worse. They make the access to information about soft skills incredibly easy. I can go figure out, how do I improve my presence very, very quickly. I can find an article on that, or I can get a prompt about that. But it's very different from actually practicing those things. And you really can't get that practice or get those reps in without meeting with people face to face.
Awesome. You mentioned at one point vulnerability. And I think people are afraid to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Or afraid of the consequences or whatever. Do you think that vulnerability can actually make someone more authentic?
100%. It's easier to connect with an individual if you see them as a person. Part of being a full, complete person is having some vulnerability and showing some of the chinks in your armor. And vulnerability isn't necessarily a bad thing by any case. Having a few chinks in your armor shows that you've been to battle and you've been through it before. And I think being vulnerable just makes you easier to connect with, and also makes you less of a threat too. Some people ascend up the ladder just by being like real big go-getters, but they often sometimes have trouble making meaningful connections because they sort of isolate themselves, and they isolate themselves by always trying to present themselves as authoritative or as capable as possible. And so that kind of interrupts some of the potential for meaningful connections that happen through vulnerability.
I know I see that on social media. I mean, I'm probably guilty of that myself. I don't post on there that I've had a bad day. I talk about, oh, this went perfectly, or probably this afternoon I'll post something that I did my first podcast or whatever. So I think we strive to put out that perfect image of ourselves. But I think when we're vulnerable, we make ourselves more human.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a little bit more of a trend against that tradition on social media, especially on LinkedIn. I am seeing more people be honest about, I had a terrible day today, or I dropped this sale, or I missed this opportunity. I have one partner who even, I don't know if this was in an interview that she did or in a post that she did, but she talked about like, her company had some really tough financial times, and she wasn't sure if she was going to make payroll, and she had to dig into her line of credit and really make some changes. And the company's back better than ever before now, but it was a really scary moment. And I had so much more respect for her after reading that, because I could relate, and I knew that she was able to be vulnerable like that and be honest about that. But I also knew that she'd recovered, and that I think is super inspirational, and was just really great to see, because it's very easy as a leader or as a business owner, especially as a solopreneur, to get down on yourself and see some of the failures that you have that nobody else notices. And when you see sort of that constant success after success on social media, it can be very damaging. But when you realize that everybody is struggling on some level, it allows you to give yourself a little bit more grace.
I think so. Well, I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm really grateful for you being here. If someone wanted to get a hold of you and get a hold of Poetica Marketing, how would they do that?
Yeah, they can find Poetica at poeticamarketing.com, or they can email me directly at patrick@poeticamarketing.com. That's POETICA marketing.com.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thank you, Charlie.
Nice to have you here. And thank you all for joining us today for Soft Skills, Strong Results. I'm your host, Charlie Krebs. And remember that soft skills are the human side of success. Thank you.